this is a naturally deep harbor. I mean, the deepest ship we could take in here is 52 feet, and that's kind of out of the norm for most East Coast ports. They had to dredge to get to that point. Portland was naturally deep, so the pipeline deepened their berth, and they allowed 52 feet of draft, so which we don't see any longer. I wish we did.
This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. And frankly, it's a rare show indeed when we visit wild Portland. Maybe the nightlife is wild, maybe the traffic. But what if we got onto a tugboat and took a look at Maine's largest city from the water side? Suddenly, Portland looks completely different. It's a working harbor, and you really don't see everything going on out there when you're eating a meal or having a beer in the old port. But there are tankers and barges and cruise ships coming in. There are water taxis and ferries moving around. The Coast Guard is there. And there are still a few fishing boats, though not like there used to be. When something big needs moving, the mover is probably Portland Tugboat. We're about to climb on in one of their newest boats and take a wilder ride than usual. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, Napa Auto Parts, and EBS. Portland Tugboat has been around since 1985. Brian Fournier was just an infant when his parents founded the company. Brian likes to say that he was 3 years old, standing on a paint can the first time he got to steer a tug, and he's been doing it ever since. He is now president of the company, but he's still one of its captains. A few years ago, Portland Tugboat was acquired by McAllister Towing, one of the oldest and largest towing companies in America. Think of it more as like a marriage. That company was founded by Captain James McAllister in 1864, and it's been a family business ever since. McAllister's great-grandson now runs the company. So these combined family businesses have the resources to float a thoroughly modern fleet of tugs. Portland Tugboat's tugs can now be found working hard anywhere along the Maine coast and sometimes right down into New York City Harbor. We're about to get on the Andrew McAllister, the biggest, baddest tug in the Portland Tugboat fleet. There's a handful of us who have gathered at 40 Commercial Street in Portland, the home of Portland Tugboat. It's 4 members of the legislature's Environment and Natural Resources Committee, which is a committee I've served on for 11 years. This all came about because of a bill that appeared before the committee in midwinter. The bill would have required booms around tankers in Portland Harbor whenever fuel was being offloaded. On the surface, it looked like a pretty good idea. In practice, it's neither wise nor practical. An anchored tanker swinging around anchor in a main tide in Portland Harbor would require an enormous boom, which would block much of the harbor and isn't really necessary because of all the other safety precautions that are taken. The bill died, but the tug crew thought it might be a good idea if we got a look at what they really do. So, here we are.
Good morning. Morning. See you, buddy. Wonderful morning, ain't it? It is. A little warm.
Yeah. Give me your bag. I'll hand you your bag down after. There you go. It's all right.
It only takes a moment to get down the plank and onto the deck. The tugboat is 91 feet long and 36 feet wide. There's plenty of elbow room in the front because the crew needs a lot of room to move around while they're attaching towing lines. We gather there.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you all were able. No. I'm glad you were all able to do it. And I know tug companies like to show off their boats.
So the first guy we chat up is Ed. Every tug has a captain, pilot, and a senior engineer. Of course, it's the engineer who has to keep everything running.
Senior engineer?
Yep.
You said? So how often during the course of any week do you have to say, oh, crap?
Not a lot. This boat's pretty reliable because it's fairly new, so that helps.
Was it built?
This was 08.
What do you got
She's
for
9 years old. EMDs, 6,000 horsepower.
Nice.
Total.
2?
Yep.
2 engines generating 6,000 horsepower. And this boat can turn on a dime.
Yeah, this boat has Z drives. So basically the propeller hangs down in a pod that can spin around 360 degrees. It's almost like having 2 outboards hanging down, spin around.
Z drives. If you know what the stern drive of an inboard-outboard looks like, now picture 2 of those hanging straight down under the rear of the tug. Each one can be turned 360 degrees. If you turn one forward and one back, you can turn the tug around in its own length. I follow Ed down into the galley. I'm surprised at how big the kitchen and dining area is. So do you ever go out long enough that you actually need a galley?
Yeah. Actually, this boat goes down to Buzzards Bay a lot, in the Cape Cod Canal, to do escorts. Because they have mandatory escorts of tugs and barges through Buzzards Bay, and our company does those escorts. Yeah, about 10 years ago, they had an oil spill in Buzzards Bay, tugging barge. So since then, the state of Massachusetts has mandated escorts.
So how did you end up?
That's all about.
So where'd you go to school to learn all this stuff?
I went to Maine Maritime.
You did?
For engineering.
That was going to be my guess.
Yep.
It seems like everybody who runs a boat or deals with an engine.
Yeah.
You know, I often think we take Maine Maritime Academy for granted. But you find graduates holding down great jobs all over Maine, and it's not just on vessels. If there's a boiler to be operated anywhere in the state, maybe at a paper company or a waste-to-energy incinerator, you'll often find an MMA graduate. I head back onto the deck and back up front where Brian Fournier is waxing eloquent about the Andrew McAllister. As we mentioned, this is the 5th generation of McAllisters running the company, and most of the company's tugs get named after the offspring of the founder. Of the 4 tugs in Portland, the Andrew McAllister is the newest and most powerful. It's also equipped for firefighting. That's because at one time, a lot of oil was flowing through Portland. Brian Fournier explains.
She was built with the Portland pipeline in mind because we were bringing some big ships into the Portland pipeline, in deep. And I don't really care how big they are, if they're an aircraft carrier or if they're a cruise ship or a tanker. It's how much is below the water. It's what matters to me, because that's where all the mass is. This is a naturally deep harbor. I mean, the deepest ship we can take in here is 52 feet, and that's kind of out of the norm for most East Coast ports. They had to dredge to get to that point. Portland was naturally deep, so the pipeline deepened their berth, and they allowed 52 feet of draft, so which we don't see any longer. I wish we did. House Island, I believe that's privately owned. Cushing Island, that's privately owned, and the other 3 are municipalities. They're all city-owned. So the ferry boat is a municipality for the city. It's kind of a nightmare. Yeah. They're good. They're good to work with, but especially this time of year, everybody just thinks the ferry's going to wait for them. But they're on a schedule. It's like a city bus. Yeah.
Okay, we got a kayaker out here. How often do you have to worry about them?
You know, for the most part, we don't worry about kayakers so much. It's the recreational boater more. The kayaker does not want to get run over. They know they don't stand a chance. And sometimes they get a little askew, and we'll find them out in the fog where they shouldn't be. We'll kind of point them in the right direction. But it's the pleasure boaters that are just a nightmare for me. I mean, this summer in particular, it's been especially bad. I'm not sure
why. Pleasure boaters are a nightmare everywhere.
Thank you. I mean, I think it should be required, like they get a driver's license for their car.
Actually, I don't disagree with
Safe boating course should be a requirement, and for the weekend you can guarantee half of them are half car.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But it's if they own their $3 million yacht, they just think they have the right of way. Well, somebody told me there's an equation. Steel goes into fiberglass only once. So there you go. That's right. That's right. I don't like to think that way as a pilot. So ordinarily here you'd see Portland Head, but obviously with the fog, it's just beyond the fog. We'll make a U-turn, and then beyond that is Casco Bay and the open ocean. So all our ships usually come from the east, from Canada, with refined product, which is gasoline or heating oil and sometimes jet fuel. We don't see as much jet anymore, and we still see a little bit of paper and pulp. The paper industry still got a little life left in it, thank goodness. And road salt's a big commodity for Portland. It seems to be the hub for the state. I mean, there's some in Searsport.
I was going to say, isn't there a big hub in Searsport?
And that's mostly for down east. And here it's for central and southern Maine. And then we compete with Portsmouth a little bit for road salt. But it's Maine. We're always going to have road salt.
Yeah,
right.
Salt coming from Canada too?
Salt's come from Chile.
Chile?
Yeah. We used to get it from Pugwash, Canada. Now it just seems like the mine everybody's interested is in Chile.
All right, raise your hand if you knew that a lot of the road salt that comes into Maine comes in by barge through Portland Harbor. And raise your hand higher if you knew it came from Chile. I'm on board the Andrew McAllister, the most powerful tugboat in Maine, and we've been motoring out into Casco Bay. But on this morning, there's a fog bank dead ahead, and everything we want to see is actually back in the harbor. So we'll turn around right here, and remember, this boat can turn completely around in its own length. When we return, we'll learn more about the secret working side of Portland, the part that most people never see. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. When we talk about Wild Maine, we're almost never talking about Portland. But today's show is on the most powerful tugboat in Maine, the Andrew McAllister, with 2 Z drives and 6,000 horsepower. It's the big kahuna in the Portland tugboat fleet. Brian Fournier is president, and just about everything he's telling us is coming as quite a surprise.
Another interesting fact about this tugboat is she has more firefighting capacity than the city of South Portland's fireboat. So we don't like to talk about it. It's just an unknown, it's not a rival, but they know when we go by, we can put a fire out quicker than they can. So we give a nod. We actually, when the boat's out of the water or not in service, they call us, and we're now officially the fireboat for the city of Portland. We don't actually put the firefighters on board, but if they had to get underway and they've come with us and trained, they get on and we go. Yep. So the fireboat just had a maintenance period at the beginning of the summer, and they were out of the water for 2 weeks. So that shoots a lot of water, and there's another one on the stern.
That just come right out of
ocean water. Yeah.
This is a really powerful pump.
It's a very powerful pump. We'll actually fire one up for you. As much as that upset all the painters today, they could get over it.
So, could you hit that house from here?
Not quite that far, but we could probably reach that green buoy. I mean, we can reach almost all the way across our pier when we're fighting up. The house going into the fog that's the house I grew up in. There you go. Thanks. It just disappeared in the fog. I see it's on the market right now for $2.4 million.
Right, check.
Yeah, right. We didn't pay $2.4 million for it. So there's not much to see here because of the fog. So again, if I was getting on a ship, I would be getting on right where that fog is and praying. I'd be doing a fog dance as I bring it up the harbor to make sure there's no more fog, because I really need to see the Casco Bay Bridge before I enter it.
So if you got there and you couldn't see it, you would just hold it?
I put it in the anchorage.
Put it in the anchorage?
Yeah, because the customer usually gets upset when the tugboats are out there too long, because we're on the clock, obviously. And they'll call me and complain about the bill, and I'm like, well, I have tugboats and crews to pay for. You have a ship to pay for. I get it. We try to work with them, but if we're underway, we're on the clock.
So what's the hourly rate for you guys?
It varies. Different customers. Irving is our biggest customer, so they get a little bit of a discount. But on the weekend, it's about $1,000 an hour, and during the day, normal business hours, it's $800. It's very reasonable. It's very for this piece of equipment. This is a $14 million piece of equipment. It takes a lot of $800 an hour jobs to pay for this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice that we're part of a bigger corporation. When it was my family business, we wouldn't have had a boat this nice, truly. And if you guys want to go up in the wheelhouse, we'll show you more. I mean, we don't have much to see for the next 10 minutes or so. So if you want to come up and we'll talk to the captain.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And so let me give you another point. This just an example of how much everything costs in a tugboat. So this rope is our lifeline. This big anaconda piece of rope, and it's very expensive. It's synthetic. It's not a natural substance fiber, and that piece of rope cost us $50,000.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So we really want to take care of that because it's important. It keeps us connected to the ship. The smaller ones we can.
So I can stand on this one.
That one's no problem. We can stand on the other one. It's pretty durable. I mean, we have really what we worry about the most with this particular line is the sun. The sun will actually break down. Yeah. So we cover it in the winter because of the snow, and it's just where in relation to the tug, we get most seas over the bow, so the line will freeze and the winch will freeze. I mean, this boat will come back from a job and be just encased in ice. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
This is just an awesome tugboat. McAllister did me a really solid favor by giving me this tugboat. It's an awesome tugboat. I probably may have kissed it before, because when the Casco Bay Bridge doesn't open and this boat has to do its job, it does. And the captain's pretty good too. But I won't tell him that, because then he'll want to raise.
Right. And you know how much the rope costs, so.
They all know how much the rope costs. It's no secret. So yesterday we got 5,000 gallons of fuel for this boat. And fuel's right now relatively cheap at $2.58 a gallon. But when it's up around $4, it just kills us.
So 5,000 gallons of fuel will last you how long?
This boat burns a lot, but this boat's the busiest. And this, believe it or not, we also service the Cape Cod Canal with this boat. So I'm the president of the company, but I wound up being a mate last week for 3 days on this thing. And I didn't mind it because it was just absolutely gorgeous going down Cape Cod and staying there for 3 days. And her job was to escort petroleum units going through the Cape Cod Canal. So she's the backup boat. We have a primary boat down there, and the primary boat had to go in the shipyard and get some maintenance done. So we sent this boat down. And in a pinch, they'll call us and they say, can you get to the canal at 2100 tomorrow night? And I'll look at my schedule and I'll look at my crewing and I'll look how much fuel's on the boat and I'll say yes or no.
Yeah.
Because it's expensive to run the boat down there. But McAllister has this contract that we have to service. If we don't, somebody else will. So this boat's kind of important in that aspect too.
But burn 75 gallons an hour?
90. 90. Probably a little more when I'm pushing her full. Like I don't, if you really look at my log for docking ships, I probably use full 2% of the time.
So by now, maybe you've been doing a little math in your head. It's a $14 million boat. Just the main rope costs $50,000. It burns 90 gallons of fuel per hour. Plus, it's got an experienced, well-paid crew. Running a tugboat company can't be cheap, but this workhorse is impressive. 14
knots. This is the fastest boat in the harbor. The tugboat races are in August. You're more than welcome to join us. And I drive the boat, and I'm like the New York Yankees. Everybody hates me because I have the fastest boat. It has nothing to do with me. It's just the boat people, and she's fast.
It starts in August, but it ends in September.
It's August 20th. It's one day. It's for MS. It's the MS Harbor Fest.
Yeah.
And we go out there and invite a bunch of customers and friends, and they all put a little money in the till and we go racing tugboats. It doesn't pay for the fuel, we just donate it to MS.
So do they ever give you a weight handicap to slow you down?
They try to handicap this boat all the time. Listen, I'm putting out 4 tugboats, burning fuel for free. I win. Our friendly competitor was going to stop showing up with his tugboat, so I had to let one of his captains win last year.
So what'd you have to do to throw the race?
Just slow down. This boat has an unfair advantage. Her engines, I can put it through full throttle and keep the boat perfectly still. So then once I turn the drive, she's got a way more advantage. She's already full speed, where tugboats have to build their speed. Yeah. She's there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm washing everything and everybody out of the way with these giant props.
It's got twin Z drives. So right there at the starting line of the tugboat races, it can point those 2 drives in opposite directions and crank up the engine. Then, on your mark, get set, go, they just point the drives astern and they're gone before the other tugs are even revving up. There are a lot of adventures to be had in Portland Harbor and beyond when you're on a tug.
So I was inbound with the ship the other day, and it was like right about here, and I'm looking down in the water, and I'm like, what the heck is that splashing? It was a seal fighting a porpoise. I'm not sure what they were fighting over, but they were just making such a splash. And the last time I saw something like that, I was offshore on an aircraft carrier coming into Portland, and it was a day just like this, kind of foggy, but you could still see the water. And we had to do a whale watch on the ship so you wouldn't run over right whales, which is, they're so dumb they can't get out of the way of right whale. That's truly what's wrong with a right whale. They're just dumb. And I'm looking down, and the girl's like, oh, there's a whale. And I'm like, God damn it, that's not a whale. It was a freaking great white right off of Portland. You could see the damn thing's teeth. It kind of just turned, gave us a smile, and swam down.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
I'm on an aircraft carrier, and I got scared.
This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. We're on a tugboat in Portland Harbor, the Andrew McAllister, the biggest, fastest tug in Maine. We're heading up into the pilot house next, where we'll probably get to play with the water cannons, take a close look at the working waterfront, and hear a little bit about the worst oil spill in Maine history. You're listening to Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. We're in Portland today. Yeah, I know, not very wild, but hang on. We're on a tugboat, the Andrew McAllister. 6,000 horsepower, 2 Z drives, 2 water cannons that are more powerful than the actual fireboat in the harbor. Brian Fournier is president of Portland Tugboats, and he's pointing out what we're seeing. A view of the old port, but from an angle that not many people get to see. We'll start with that blue building over there.
This blue building here, that's Union Wharf, which is privately owned, but the blue ship just to the south of it is the Maine responder. And again, in the event of an oil spill, this vessel will go out and deploy boom.
There are actually two watercraft there, the boat with the booms and a barge that will contain any oil that is skipped up.
So we had a big spill here. Casco Bay Bridge was not in existence. It was being built in 1996. It was the Julienne.
Yes.
And it was pretty catastrophic. And lucky the ship didn't sink there. I was on the tug that day, and it was just a gorgeous day. So they had done a great job containing all this oil. I mean, the ship was literally leaking oil from the point of impact all the way up to her berth. So
and that's when things went very wrong. It's a 30-foot gash in the hull of the Julienne, and its oil is gushing from the tanker into Portland Harbor. But we're lucky. The boom crew is already in the area and just happened to be available to respond quickly. They got the boom around the boat and most of the damage contained.
They said they want to see that main responder alongside that ship while it's leaking oil. So they had 3 layers of protection boom that had pretty much contained all the oil that they had to open up to let that, just for, I don't even know what the reason was. It made no sense. And when they opened up,
somebody somewhere made the decision to use a response vessel to skim all the oil. But the oil was already mostly contained in the booms. And to let the response vessel in, they had to open the booms, which let the oil out. 180,000 gallons of petroleum thus made its way into the harbor and up into the estuary, the worst oil spill in Maine history. Today, Portland is still a big seaport for petroleum products, though not as big as it was. During World War II, German submarines were doing such damage to North American shipping that it became too dangerous to deliver oil to Canada by sea. So they built a pipeline, the Portland to Montreal pipeline. As of 2016, most of that usage had ended, although they still pump enough through to keep it wet. Now Portland is getting shipments, but not much of it is bound for Canada. Most of it is for Maine and some of it for New Hampshire. Citgo is the second busiest terminal in the port, coming up from Venezuela.
And the busiest being Buckeye, which is where that other barge is upriver. He's got ethanol. This is privately owned. That's Finn Sprague. He's a...
So Buckeye brings in just ethanol?
No, Buckeye brings in heating oil, gasoline, ethanol, and...
If you buy Irving Gas or ExxonMobil, chances are your gas came through this Buckeye terminal, especially in the Bangor area because there's another pipeline that comes up from Portland to the Queen City. As we continue along the Portland waterfront, we pass the Global Pier where the bunker barges are handled. Shinbro has a pier here. Then another dock and warehouse just before some black piles of something.
So this is Merrill's, which is now part of Sprague. P.D. Merrill bought this property and made it a private terminal, and it was thriving when P.D. Merrill was alive. Sprague, not so much. I mean, we do paper and wood pulp here and coal and salt right now. When P.D. Merrill owned it, we did so much more. Scrap, cobblestone, broken glass would all come in. They'd send broken glass on a ship to Italy and then come back as wine bottles. So in front of us you see this black mound that's a covered pile of salt. They top it over because salt, and over there to the starboard side too, behind that terminal, it's another pile of road salt. So they cover it so in the rain it doesn't dissolve. And inside the building you can see the paper.
Yeah.
Yep, that's...
Now is that coming in country or going out?
That will go out.
That's going out.
Yep.
You know Portland is a commercial seaport, but so much of it takes place out of view. As we continue to ride the Andrew McAllister tugboat through the inner harbor, we go by one more pier. You can see all the storage facilities for petroleum products when you're passing by on the highway, but the simple piles of road salt, broken glass bound for Italy, pulp and wood products, you don't see those very easily. A lot of goods pass through these waters. As we motor along, we pass the competition, Winslow Marine. It's also a family tugboat company established in 1955 by Elliot Winslow. He lived to be 97 years old, and his son David runs the company now. They have 2 tugs in Portland and 2 more in Bath, where they are contracted to serve Bath Iron Works. This bigger tug that we're on goes up there to help whenever the Navy launches a $7 billion destroyer. As we come around, we pass an oil barge.
Oil. And all right, so there's a perfect example. There was 2 bunker barges here at one time competing, and the business dropped off so much that this company went out of business. But that's a bunker barge. We get closer, you see the name Bunker Portland, and she would load her fuel right there at that dock, and they'd take that tugboat would take it down to the anchorage. And I mean that's the size of it. Compare compare that barge size to that. It's just a relatively small barge, easy to move. That's a big barge. So he'll need a helper tug. That one typically did not need a helper tug, just one tug, one primary tug. There's another response barge right here. That one's owned by NRC, National Response Corporation. So in the event of a spill, that one would be deployed as well. The state barge used to be tied up right here at the Clean Harbors Pier, but the state did away with their barges.
Everything changes. Oil still moves through Portland, but not like it did just a couple of years ago. Now, barges are an interesting idea. They're just big containers. They have crew quarters, but no engines. They're just pushed and pulled around by tugs. And the idea wasn't born on the ocean.
And barges were, the idea of a barge came because of the inland rivers. And then they just adapted it to ocean barges. But, you know, you couldn't get a ship up an inland river, so everything was done by barge. And then they put these shallow draft tugboats, which are called push boats, behind them to push them up to St. Louis or as far up as the Mississippi can go. So see, that big machine on the stern has a piece of wire on it that's almost a mile long, and that's how he connects to the barge out in the ocean, and he'll just tow it with that wire. That's called a towing machine. And the wire's on the side of push gear, so he's rigidly connected to that barge right now with those wires.
So that tugs up from New York City.
New York City. And the company's owned from Louisiana, but that's a New York City-based tugboat. So this is it. I mean, this is the extent of Portland Harbor. It's
this is great.
Kind of anticlimactic.
Fairly dynamic.
There's a lot of moving pieces in any port. I mean, we obviously have to keep in close contact with the Coast Guard and keep them on our good side, as well as the other local entities and now you guys. I mean, if you ever have an issue that's brought up with anything to do with a working waterfront, please. I implore you, ask the guys that do it every day, because we know. I mean, that's what we're here for, and we're happy to offer our expertise. Either myself or Bart Klopp, the other pilot you guys met, my partner, Walter.
This all started with a bill in the legislature in front of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, on which I serve. This bill would have required booms around barges when petroleum products were being transferred in Portland Harbor. We killed the bill pretty quickly after lots of testimony on why it was a bad idea. But the tugboat guys thought it was a good idea that we come take a look for ourselves anyway, which is what we've just about finished doing. We can now see what people were arguing about. First, there is tremendous safety equipment on the barges and transfer hoses which shut off flow in an emergency. And there is containment in the barges and vessels that catch leaks. An accidental spill of any significance would be pretty unlikely. Meanwhile, when a large vessel is sitting on anchor, it's going to move around that anchor with the tide, which means the boom is going to have to be enormous to get around the entire swing of the vessel, which means it's going to block the harbor so bad even a lobster boat couldn't get out. And even if something bad did happen, there are emergency response barges and skimmers standing by. So the practical effect of requiring booms in law would have been that there was very little benefit, but a whole lot more cost, which likely would have sent some of Portland's shipping economy elsewhere. Sometimes it pays to go have a look for yourself before passing a law. We're heading back to the wharf, but they've got one more trick up their sleeves, and it is jaw-dropping. We'll get there in a moment. Meanwhile, you know the vessels are usually referred to as she, right? But this is the Andrew McAllister. So do they call this tug a she or a he? The answer is coming right up. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket, with Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. We're in Portland Harbor on board Maine's biggest, baddest tugboat, the Andrew McAllister. There are 4 crew members and 4 legislators on board, including me. So, this is the Andrew McAllister. What does the crew call the boat? Is it a he or a she? Well, they'll tell you. She's a fine boat. There are some interesting common threads among all these tugboat operators. Foremost, they are often family businesses, even the big companies, even after mergers. Portland Tugboat has 4 boats here. Brian Fournier runs these. If you see a tugboat in Searsport, Bucksport, or Brewer, you're probably looking at a company run by his brothers, Fournier Tugs, based in Belfast. Shipping moves round the clock, and that's a schedule that a whole family has to get used to.
Every day, 24/7. It never ends. I mean, it doesn't, like I tell my wife, happy anniversary as I'm going out the door to dock a ship, and she gets it. I mean, it's, you know, all our family gets it. They're, you know, we're fortunate enough, because most mariners go away for weeks and months at a time, away from their family. We're in a small enough port where we go home at night, so these guys are, you know, only ever 15 minutes away from something, unless we're on a ship job.
As our tugboat is heading back to the pier, there's still a lot more to learn. For instance, how do you connect up the tug and barge? Sure, you can push them around just using your bumpers or whatever. We've learned that at sea, you can tow it with up to a mile of cable, and you can also attach to the side of a vessel and guide it along that way. But we're looking at a tug that is directly behind a barge, apparently connected by 2 cables. One at each side of the tug, connected to one at each side of the barge. Kind of snug.
So this barge here, he loaded in New York as well. And like I said, he has gasoline, but the difference between this tug and that one, this is what's called an ATB. So he does have the ability to tow this barge, but he's rigidly connected. He's got pins coming out of the side of his tugboat, and he's pinned into that barge, so he's one unit, where the tugboat upriver is 2 separate units, it's a tug and a barge.
Another hazard the tugboats have to work around. Birds, specifically ospreys. These big fish hawks like to nest on poles and towers in the harbor, and often these are right on the pier. There's one right on the pier where this barge is connected to another tug.
So this is the oldest nest in Portland, as far back as I can remember. This right here, this sucker has been here forever, and when I come in with the ship, I'm looking straight down on these birds and chicks, and they are not happy.
No.
And we have to put ropes out right next to them. I'm like, Captain, please just be very aware you can't touch that nest, because if you touch that nest or disrupt it, we have to call. And we had an osprey, actually, believe it or not, we had an osprey get caught under the pipe rail of a ship that was discharging gasoline. They had to stop the whole operation, disconnect the ship, get this osprey out from under the nest and set it free, and then reconnect it. So they stopped for the birds.
We've now been on the Andrew McAllister for a couple of hours, and we're finally back to the pier. We're still in the wheelhouse, or pilot house, or bridge, or whatever they call it on their tug, and the captain has just demonstrated pinpoint accuracy by putting the bow of the boat up against the dock within an inch of his target, a specific cleat to tie up to. 2 of the crew have gotten off and started to get us fastened when Brian suddenly decides to back up and show us another trick or 2.
You know what? Just back off the dock and just spin her one time, watch this boat maneuver.
We're gonna get away from them.
Yeah, get away from them. This boat is just amazingly maneuverable.
It's like, what are you doing?
It's like, I'm out of here.
We're done.
Okay, everyone hang on for a second.
Yeah, settle down, guys.
Hang on.
Yeah, you guys all hang on. Don't dump any Don't dump the fridge, though. Don't go any crazy.
Coffee all secure.
There's not many tugboats that can do this.
Goodness.
Wow. Show off. This is
You can
awesome.
do this by one of the lobster boats.
Once again, the crew is demonstrating the incredible maneuverability that you can get from twin Z drives that you can point in different directions. They can spin this boat in its own length, a complete 360 without moving. And then something even more incredible. Brian orders the tugboat to gun the 6,000 horsepower and get us up to 10 knots.
10 knots.
10 knots, and I can stop just by changing it. Wow. Tugboat stopping in the sun.
Wow.
Go back to that.
Yep, there you go.
Picture this. You've got a tugboat powerful enough to move fully loaded tankers. With these Z drives, you can point the 2 drives perpendicular to the boat in opposite directions, rev up the engine while still staying in one place, then snap the drives into line and basically lay rubber. Within moments, you're up to 10 knots. A boat that weighs well over 100 tons can carry 30,000 gallons of fuel oil, 500 gallons of lube oil, over 6,000 gallons of water, 3,000 gallons of foam for firefighting, all that. Then you can snap the 2 drives back into opposite directions perpendicular to the boat at full speed and stop on a dime. And that's it from Portland Harbor. My thanks to Portland Tugboat for an eye-popping look at what is happening right under your nose, but just out of sight. We're a maritime state, and there's a lot going on out there. Coming up, a special invitation to see another part of Maine's maritime heritage. Lighthouses aren't just elegant, they're historic, and each one has a story to tell. We're going to tell some of those stories. Details coming up. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. There are 65 lighthouses spread out along 5,000 miles of Maine coastline. It's not possible to see them all in one day, but that doesn't keep us from trying. Bar Harbor Whale Watch is renowned for finding whales out in the Gulf of Maine. But several times a summer, they offer special trips to visit Maine's iconic lighthouses. There's a big trip coming up next weekend, August 19th. That trip will send their big, fast catamaran down the coast from Bar Harbor all the way to Matinicus, stopping at 16 lighthouses along the way, including a couple that are way out there. September 16th, there's a Down East Lights and Photography Tour. October 14th, right in the heart of fall foliage season, we'll get on the boat, circle Mount Desert Island, cross Penobscot Bay, and head up the Penobscot River all the way to Bangor, stopping at 10 lighthouses along the way. I will be hosting that trip, too. Tickets and information available at barharborwales.com. barharborwales.com. One trip has already taken place. Saturday, September 29th, the Friendship 5 Whale Watch boat had perfect weather for the Grand Slam Lighthouse Tour, steaming from Bar Harbor all the way up to New Brunswick, visiting 18 historic lighthouses in 2 countries. And when it comes to learning the details and history of these iconic landmarks, you can't have any better experts on board than those brought in by Bar Harbor Whale Watch. Zach Cliver is the chief naturalist and circus master for this whole event. Jeremy D'Entremont wrote the book on Maine lighthouses. In fact, he's written more than a dozen books. Chris Miles is from Nova Scotia. He joined us. He's a longtime lightkeeper at many Canadian lighthouses, including some that the tour visited. The stories they tell will be the subject of next weekend's show. Oh, and as Zach Cliver explains, there was one other expert on the boat.
We have a renowned naturalist on board who has a radio program called Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. It's on 92.9. And Bob is here today. He's on the top. But Bob is an expert at especially birds, and he leads birding tours all over the state of Maine. He's helped develop a birding trail on the state of Maine, books. He leads a lot of trips for Schoodic Institute, which is out here ahead of us on the left side. There's a peninsula of land there where the Institute is located. You can go on to their site and learn more about the tours that they do. But if there are people interested in the birds, he's a great person to talk to. He is stationed on the very top of the boat at this point. He's up on the very top if you're looking for him.
The Grand Slam Lighthouse Tour is next weekend's show. You'll learn stuff like why are some made of wood, some brick, some stone? Why do some have horns and some have bells and some have neither? Are any of these lighthouses haunted? We'll save the lighthouses for next weekend, but we'll close today's show with a visit to Petite Manane. Not only does it have the second tallest lighthouse in Maine, but it's a big seabird colony, owned and managed by the Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge. Zach Cliver.
Petite Manane Island is a National Wildlife Refuge island. It's one of about 60 islands that are part of the Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge. There's 11 different seabirds that nest here at Petite Manane. There are herring gulls, great blackback gull, laughing gull. There are eider ducks, the largest duck in North America. There's also a nocturnal seabird called the Leach's storm petrel that nest in burrows down underground. They're a bird that are black in color, long kind of pointed wings, a white patch on their tail, on the rump of their tail, and they have a bouncy flight. And a bird that we would see often far offshore, feeding on plankton, and then they come back to their nests around sunset. There are also 3 types of tern that nest here. You may know this seabird called the tern. Maine fishermen call them sea swallows. They're white with pointed wings, a forked tail, pointed bill. They're typically white with a black cap on their head. They're very aerial, they're talkative, they're full of life, and often flying out offshore to catch fish. And when we get here, you'll see the terns flying in with little fish in their mouth to feed their young. The terns nest in the grass up on top of the island. There are common terns, and that's the predominant type of tern here. There are Arctic terns, so anywhere from around 800 to 1,000 pairs of common terns, 500 or so pairs of Arctic terns, and then there's a pair or two of roseate tern. Now, when I first started coming out here, there were about 30 pairs of roseate terns. They have a rosy breast. They're quite beautiful, but sadly, their numbers have been dwindling. Their numbers have been going down, and now there's just a pair or two here. So they are a federally endangered seabird. All these terns go south for the winter. They go to Central America, South America, and the Arctic tern goes all the way down to Antarctica. They have a tremendous migration. They annually fly at least 24,000 miles a year, but some of them even fly further. They put tags on them that track the birds, and they had one that flew 43,000 miles on migration. It flew to Antarctica and then almost all the way around to Australia. Australia is on the other side of the Earth from us right now, below us. And so these birds can live to 35 years of age. If you do your math, it suggests they can fly well over 1 million miles, maybe 2 million miles in their lifetime. So that is a good frequent flyer policy. So there's also 4 birds in the puffin family here. There's about 40 to 50 pairs of puffins, black on top, white below, bright orange feet, brightly colored bill. There's also a bird about the size of a puffin called the black guillemot. They don't get as much recognition as the puffin. They're kind of like the red-headed stepchild of seabirds, puffins. They should get more appreciation. In fact, there's now an International Guillemot Appreciation Day that has been established to give them more recognition. I think it's on June 25th, something like that. But they're fun. They're black with white wing patches, red feet. There are 2 larger birds in the puffin family which can be seen here, one of which nests here, the razorbill. The razorbill is black and white. It doesn't have any kind of red or orange on it. It has a big, thick black bill with a white line on it. They look like they're dressed in a tuxedo. They are like a super puffin. They are really fancy. And then you have a bird that's brown and white called the common murre. It's big, has a thin bill, and some of them have a white eye ring with a line that goes away below the eye. It's a beautiful, it's almost like it's been painted on their face. It's a very beautiful marking. They're called bridled murre. They're a version of the common murre. So there are lots of different birds here nesting at Petite Manan. There are 4 researchers from the Fish and Wildlife Service that live out here all summer. They are here studying the birds. They are wildlife biologists. They have bird blinds set up all over the island. They sit in the bird blinds and they use a telescope, and they identify the types of prey that they bring back to feed their young. In years where they see them bring back a lot of sardines and hake, the chicks do well. They raise a lot of chicks. Those are high in protein and fat, and a lot of the chicks survive. Their weight is good. But in lean years, they do not see those fish. And so fish are incredibly important. So one of the things they've been doing is tagging the birds and tracking them out on the ocean to see where they go. They're interested in the habitat of the ocean here. It's not just the island that's important, it's where they go to find food that's important too. So the Fish and Wildlife Service, a great partner for lighthouses. They help maintain a lot of lighthouses. They do a lot of upkeep of these buildings, and they have a wonderful maintenance crew. We do a lot of partnering with them, and great organization to support. So we'll be slowing down here when we get closer to Petite Manan. You can see the island now is here at 2 o'clock On our right side, it's spelled P-E-T-I-T, and second word, Manan, M-A-N-A-N.
That's Zach Cliver, Chief Naturalist for Bar Harbor Whale Watch, with a story of what we were about to see in the approach to Petite Manan Lighthouse, the second of 18 lighthouses on the Grand Slam Tour that took place July 29th. And you should have seen lighthouse number 16, Machaya Seal Island. Puffins everywhere, plus whales. All of this Maine adventure is actually right under your very nose. You just have to point your nose in the right direction. The big Mid-Coast Lighthouse Tour is coming up in 2 weeks, August 19th. That's 16 lighthouses from Bar Harbor to Matinicus. Info and tickets at barharborwhales.com. Bar Harbor Whale Watch is a sponsor of Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, as is Hammond Lumber, Napa Auto Parts, and EBS. Join us next Saturday morning at 9 or Sunday morning at 8 as we recap the biggest lighthouse tour you can get in Maine. If you miss it, all shows are archived at 929theticket.com, and you can listen whenever it's convenient to you. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.